hello and welcome to this new interview of this new series of our Quantum Way Chronicles, a very special one, a South African chronicle. I'm here in Johannesburg, as South Africans say, with Dr. Ela Manga. Hello, Ela.
Hi, Florence.
It's so nice to see you here.
Oh, it's so wonderful to be with you in person.
In your country.
Yes.
In your home.
Yeah, it's very special to speak to you here.
We have a lot to cover, but your book has been translated into French.
Yes.
It's released on March the 10th. So depending on when people are listening to this interview, it will be in the future or it will be in the past. But I'm really thrilled to launch this book because I think it's really a profound book. It's called Breathe, Respire in French. We kept the same title because it's so important nowadays to breathe, but it's not just breathe, this inspiration and expiration, but it's also take a break, breathe from the activity of nowadays that is so stressful. And it's really a book about how to prevent burnout, but also get out of burnout and not go to this extreme exhaustion that burnout can be.
Yeah.
What can you say about this book? Why you wrote it and how you came to write this book? Maybe.
I started considering the idea of burnout when I was working as an integrative practitioner just after I had moved away from practicing as a GP. So I was working from a holistic paradigm. And in working with so many people who are really passionate about making change in the world, people who are working in NGO spaces, artists, entrepreneurs, people in leadership, I noticed that there was an interesting trend, firstly in their quality of energy that seemed on the surface to be quite high energy, quite exuberant, happy, passionate, but at the same time, there were very obvious physical symptoms that were manifesting, which seemed to be in conflict with each other. So I started to explore this idea of adrenalized energy and how it serves us at some point, but at some point, the body's capacity to maintain that state of energy is overwhelmed. And that's when we start to burn out. So when the nervous system becomes overtaxed and overburdened from a way of being that is just too prolonged and out of balance, that's when the body starts to, speak to us in an attempt to recalibrate itself. So I became really interested in this idea of what burnout is beyond just the psychology of it, but also in understanding how that connects to the autonomic nervous system. And
so how do you define burnout?
Yeah.
Because it's, there's professional burnout, but now we know that there are many different areas where we can burn out, like parental
that's right.
burnout. Yeah. So how do you define burnout?
It's interesting because the World Health Organization recently classified burnout as a real classification, but only in terms of the workspace. And to me, that just doesn't seem like it really expands and explains the real phenomenon of burnout, which impacts every aspect of our being. We cannot speak about burnout just in context of work when we are not considering how that impacts every other aspect of our life, our home life, our emotional life, our relationships. We cannot have the conversation of burnout if we do not consider every aspect of ourselves and even our belief systems. So burnout to me is when we disconnect from our internal resources and our capacity to recalibrate and maintain a state of homeostasis. You know, the body is incredibly intelligent. This physical system, the psychological system, our whole makeup is exquisitely designed, and it is incredibly forgiving and self-regulating and self-healing. And so we burn out when somehow we have disconnected from that internal capacity just because we've done it for too long, or, you know, we are not aware of the patterns that pull us out of this capacity to regenerate and recalibrate. So the idea for this book is firstly to explain the science of burnout, how the nervous system is calibrated, how can we understand our physical symptoms in context of the autonomic nervous system, in context of our relationship with our feelings and emotions, in context of our relationship with perhaps unconscious belief systems that drive our thinking, our behavior. You know, it's easy to have the conversation of burnout if we are only looking at lifestyle factors like eating better or moving better. And of course, we talk about those things. These are important. But however, as we go through the book, we look at three aspects of body's intelligence, mind's intelligence, and heart's intelligence. Mm-hmm. And so we journey through all the dimensions of who we are to arrive at really some of the core deep belief systems that are embedded very early on in our life. And how does that start to change the way that we relate to ourselves? How does that govern the way that we relate to each other in the world? How do those belief systems influence the way that we engage with ourselves and the world? And often we can't really sustainably heal from burnout if we do not address those core aspects of who we are.
Would you, because you talk about healing from burnout, would you recommend this book to people who are to prevent burnout, or to people who are already or nearby the burnout, or for people who are burned out?
Yes, absolutely. All of the above. You know, I don't think that anybody living in our current reality is not on the road to burnout or burnt out already. You know, even young children at school are experiencing this. And we're seeing this in the rising mental health crisis that we are seeing. We are seeing it playing out in so many ways on a societal level with young people. So I really think it's so incredibly important to equip ourselves with a deeper understanding of how we are designed. And so we can approach our health and our well-being with more understanding, with more empowerment, and with more compassion.
What I like about your book is that it's both really, it's readable, it's easy to, you know, I like it's very easy to understand the every concept you describe, but also you give a lot of examples that people can relate to, and you also give a lot of practices. So it's like a three parts, three reading, three types of reading the book.
That's right. So every chapter is based on someone that I've actually worked with. And I think when people read stories, they can relate. So there's a big human aspect of it. There's a storytelling aspect of it. And I think storytelling is so powerful as a way to connect with ourselves, to connect with each other. And so it begins with a storytelling aspect. And then we move into understanding the science of what actually is going on here in a very simple way, in a way that is accessible and in language that is accessible. And yes, then we kind of conclude each chapter with some very practical tools and tips and a takeaway and a little practice perhaps, and maybe a little creative process So yeah, it's also kind of like a workbook.
Mm-hmm. And when you talk about storytelling, you tell your story in the first chapter of your book, and how you encountered burnout while you were doing you were studying medicine.
Absolutely.
And also the first you first wanted to be a dancer, and
Yes.
and then you wanted to be a writer.
Yes.
And then you became a doctor, and there you combine everything, because I think that's a good maybe a summary of who you are, this book,
Yeah.
or of your hopes as a teenager, and also the hopes as an adult now, and all the work you've done.
Yeah, absolutely. And I suppose that's the gift that burnout offered me.
Mm-hmm.
You know, in reflecting back on my childhood and the way I was as a child and what I loved, I was always a creative being. And, you know, I think that medical school really disconnected me from my creativity. And that's hard. You know, I think we're all creative beings. But sometimes our educational systems and our institutions disconnect us from who we innately are. And so it gets buried and locked somewhere, you know. And it's also kind of some kind of a trauma, you know. It's unprocessed energy. It's beautiful energy, it's potential, but it stays somewhere in the system. And sometimes the burnout is the breaking down of old ways of being, you know, that really get us to reevaluate what's important to us. And so this is a continuous journey of bringing all the aspects of who I am into the work that I do. So I feel less kind of compartmentalized or siloed. And so this is the constant work that I'm doing, is just to bring more of myself into every space that I engage with.
I'd like to read a quote, because it's really echoing what you've just said. Let me try to find it. Sorry, oops, there you are. Burnout can be a catalyst for growth and change, and an opportunity to create a life that is authentically energized and meaningful.
Yeah.
But it's hard to say. We were talking about that just before this interview. It's obvious that when we get out, if we manage to get out, we bring back some, we recover our energy. And but it's hard to tell that to someone who is in burnout,
Absolutely.
right? Because there is no way out.
And we don't have
how
capacity.
Can you elaborate maybe on this, both on what you're saying? That's what you were saying about your story. I wouldn't be there if I hadn't gone through burnout. But also, how can we, what can we say to people who are in that hole, that deep, dark hole?
Yeah. Yeah, I think you're right, Florence. You know, when we're in the midst of a crisis, we often can't see the way out. And we're in a state of despair and sometimes grief, because we are experiencing the loss of an idea. We're losing a sense of identity on some level. Grief can also be an invitation to surrender, you know, because there's nothing to hold on to. If we can allow ourselves to surrender and know that something is holding us, we feel safer to allow that process. So a lot of the work that we do in the space is about learning to hold space for ourselves and finding someone that can support you and hold space for you and with you. And I think that is really something to consider and really important, because we are wired and designed to want to fix something and to want to feel better very quickly. And I think that the journey of healing requires patience. it takes time, and this is something that we have to learn and accept on this journey. It's a dropping, a falling to arrive at a new ground from which we can discover what perhaps has always been there, what has been waiting for us, and perhaps what we never considered as part of who we are. So I think that burnout, the experience of burnout, also requires the capacity to slowly and gently hold space for ourselves. And so the work that we do supports people in absolutely just learning to soften, to make space, to relax, and not relax. We use the term glibly, relax, but to actually support the tangible, embodied experience of relaxation, which many people have never experienced or don't have the memory of experiencing. And so through the practices of conscious breathing and embodied practices, we support the nervous system to move right back to a state of experiencing safety. And even that is something that, needs to be cultivated over time. We can't just impose safety on someone. It's something that needs to be cultivated and practiced. And so even working with a simple practice like breath awareness helps people to feel more comfortable with their interiority, with their sensations, with their feelings, to hold space for their feelings. I think that we are terrified of feelings. And we kind of put it into we put it under the umbrella of anxiety, so all our emotions get kind of put under this category of anxiety. But when we can tease out the core emotions and how we experience them in the body and the role that it plays, it can be incredibly empowering. So when we start to cultivate our relationship with our own breathing, that is always there, that has always been there, it is one step closer, And that's what I really love about working with the breath, is that it drops us out of the space of mind, which can often perpetuate the stories and the stories we tell about ourselves, and just to drop into an embodied state that we are wired for. The body knows it. The body wants to feel this. And when we can start just putting very simple things in place, then it's incredible how the rest of the system starts to follow. One of my mentors and teachers, Dr. Bernard Brom, says something that has really supported me in my work and the work with my clients and patients, is that we don't have to plug all the holes, And when we're in a state of burnout, we're sometimes so overwhelmed with all the things we perceive to be wrong, and we feel like we need solutions for each of those symptoms. And yet, when we can just create the conditions for healing to take place, everything else begins to fall in place, because we are an interconnected system.
I have so many questions coming to my mind, so I'm going to sort it out inside. One of my questions would be like, when I listened to you and when I've read your book, I felt it so universal.
Mm-hmm.
But there's also the South African context. You wrote it here.
Yes.
How can you come from one kind of specific social and economic and environment and nature and country context to a so universal message you're giving with your book? And what makes it so special from South Africa to the whole world and to the French-speaking world also?
Well, I think the first is that we are all human and we all share the same human experience in different ways. I think working in the South African context, where the majority of the population does not have access to basic health care, has made me think about how we can tap into our internal resources more, how we can bring a deeper sense of agency in terms of our supporting our health, and how it's important to change the language and the way we're relating to health that is less siloed and more interconnected. And when we go back to the principles of African indigenous wisdom, and we see universal principles that are applicable to every person, it doesn't matter where we are. And if we look at any indigenous knowledge system, we'll see the same threads. And so here in South Africa, the sense of Ubuntu, interconnectedness, is very alive in ways that I think is not always measurable or tangible, but there's a sense of it, of a sense of community, a sense of connection with the land, with nature, with tapping into song and dance as a way to move energy, transform trauma. In the days of apartheid, many people in the communities that were disadvantaged and were experiencing trauma went to dance and song, and that was so healing for communities. There was a sense of healing in when people sang together and danced together in protest, or as a way to make sense, or of a way to move a very deep pain. So there's something really embodied in the way that we relate to healing practices. There's something about our sense of community, which I think can be lost. Even in South Africa, when we tend to live in silos and away from communities. And I'm seeing more and more the limitations of one-to-one work and the power in collective spaces, the power in collective storytelling, the power of just sitting together and listening to each other's stories, the power of music and drumming and dance. So there's so much to be learned here. And there's a sense of intimacy with land here that I have not experienced anywhere else in the world. And so when we're that intimate with land teaches us, nature teaches us, because we are part of it.
When we think about South Africa from far away, there are two words coming, and you mentioned that just before. It's apartheid and nature, and the incredible, and having been here for a little more than a week, I can really feel that strength of nature and how it brings back energy into us. And I think I really you emphasize that the connection to nature is so important.
Yeah.
But you mentioned also the apartheid, and I mentioned the apartheid because it's so important when it comes to South Africa. It's you gone to medical school just at the end of apartheid, if I remember well.
Yeah.
How was it for you, and how did you combine? How can we combine the two? This trauma history, that is still ongoing, and that the wounds are still here. We can feel them.
Yeah. I think the trauma conversation is particularly alive in South Africa, and it's one that we can't ignore. However, I think that in the attempt to find solutions to our health issues, our socioeconomic issues, we are still not looking at the kind of the core issues that are playing out in terms of the way that governments are run and systems are run. And I believe that if we do not address the root causes of why people behave in certain ways, if leaders do not take responsibility for their own trauma. So many people we know have experienced unspeakable trauma in this country and in many other countries. However, I think that the way that we have kind of engaged with the trauma conversation is still not deep enough, but there's potential to model what the rest of the world could learn from. And I think that this is part of why I wrote this book, to harness the gifts that we have in this country, the wisdom that we have in this country, the power of nature that we have in this country, and to learn from our past and to tap into the incredible resources we have here in terms of people and in terms of heart. And I think there's so much to be learned here, just in the way that we dealt with coming out of apartheid and, what was, how we were able to model what healing could mean. I think we need to get back there. And I think that we need to remember what hope means and that we all have the capacity to experience healing. We are wired for healing. And this is not just limited to people in a particular part of the world. Mm-hmm. I think that we all have so much to learn from each other. And that's what's so exciting about this conversation and working with Quantum Way, is that we're learning from each other, and we're weaving threads of wisdom from all over the world. And I think that's what's really needed now, is to weave together the wisdom from all our indigenous practices, from all our life experiences, from all our healing stories, and to weave something that we can start to, create a container for the process of healing that we are all in.
And it's so important to give this hope. I feel a lot of hope when you're talking like that. And in this world that is so polarized today, with all these extreme things that are happening, both the political issues, but also the climate change, and the stress that is getting higher and higher. I think what is the hope that you have with the book, but with all the work you do? You're also the founder of Breathwork Africa. You've created Humanity. Yeah. What is your hope today for the world, and how can we do our part of the healing, or healing individual, but also the collective healing?
Yeah. Well, I believe that just as personal burnout is an invitation to tap into deeper qualities of who we are, into our essence and to our internal resources, the symptoms of collective burnout are also an opportunity to think about what is really important to us as human beings. We all want the same thing. And I think if we can honor that, and if we can, as a collective, tap into compassion, and we can tap into what we really know is important to us as humans, we can work within our sphere of influence, and that creates a ripple effect. Every single one of us has a sphere of influence, whether that is a friend, whether that is our workspace and our team, whether that is just our family. When we take responsibility for what healing means to each of us, and it means different things to different people, that creates a ripple effect. And that creates the quantum shift, because we can feel really hopeless that whatever we do doesn't make a difference. But we have no idea how one small word, one small gesture can make a massive difference in someone else's life. And I think we need to remember that we all, every single one of us, has a sphere, has a circle, has a constellation that we can work within. But it does require that we have the courage and the compassion to hold space for ourselves and each other.
At the end of the book, you give credit to Thanksgiving, gratitude, and I really want to thank you for this conversation we've had together. And maybe I don't know what you are thankful for today.
Yeah. Well, I'm just so thankful that we can have this conversation, that, that you saw something in my work and in my book, and that you have decided to translate it into French, which is something that is so incredibly exciting. I never imagined that that would happen. And I really, I do have so much gratitude for you and for Quantum Way. I really do hope that this book can touch the hearts of the readers who find it in their hands.
Thank you, Ella. And for those who don't have the book yet, really run to your bookstore and buy the Breathe, Respire of Ela Manga. Thank you.